All right, it looks like it's just about time. So good evening and welcome to the third and sadly final week of this year's Hirshhorn Museum Sculpture Garden Summer Camp Film Festival. I'm Dave Wilt, and it's been my pleasure to have been your host, your camp counselor this year, and for the past 6 years, and I hope for a few more years to come. I mean, you know, if we didn't have the summer camp, I might have to do something more drastic with my summer, like take a vacation or something. We don't want that to happen. So this year's theme is Baby Camp, in case this is your first week here. And as always, we're welcomed to the Baby Camp by our mascot, Mr. Baby Camp himself. You know, I didn't care too much for him when this series started, but now I'm becoming a believer. Hard to believe, isn't it? And just when I finally got used to him, it's the end of the summer camp and time for us to be relieving. So, tonight's feature, however, is the 1990 film Cry Baby. Not to be confused with Cry Baby Killer, which was Jack Nicholson's first movie, or from this little scene scary TV movie, or from this documentary about the Cry Baby, which is a pedal that you make the wah-wah noise with guitar. Now, what we're going to see is Cry Baby, 1990, a spoof of teen musicals directed by John Waters and starring Johnny Depp. Sure, it's not Cry Baby Killer, but it's still a lot of fun. Oops, a little heavy-handed here. This is the trailer for it, just to give you an idea of what you're going to see.
He's been hurt. He's been mistreated. He's been misunderstood. He's Crybaby Walker.
Yeah, you're looking to rumble. You're looking at me cause I'm the king. I'm the king. I'm the king. King Crybaby with a tear in my eye.
I'm so tired of being good.
You're the king, you're gonna cry. Oh, baby, cry. Oh, baby, cry. Oh, baby, cry. Oh, baby, cry.
Good girls want him bad.
Hi.
Bad girls want him worse.
Look, Crybaby, you scorched me, man.
You're a dead man, Walker. You need a queen. Come on. Yeah, you're the sweetest hunk of sugar that I've ever
The only place you're going to sing is in jail.
will ever had your love.
I have told you, the young lady does not like to be poor.
Just touch me for 1 second before I explode.
He's not just antisocial.
Get on.
He was born to be bad.
Just one night of happiness, that's all I ask.
Cry, baby, cry, baby, cry.
Johnny Depp is Crybaby. A film by John Waters.
I thought before we talk about Cry Baby and two Johnnies, Waters and Depp, that we'd take a look at some of the films that inspired tonight's movies. While movies about teenagers who strayed from the straight and narrow can be found in the 1930s and in the 1940s, the genre really began in the 1950s. Films about teens in the 50s and early 60s are sometimes categorized as either wild youth or mild youth movies. Cry Baby is certainly a spoof of the mild youth movies, but it also has some wild youth attributes. Traditional wild youth and mild youth films were more or less contemporary to the time of their production, reflecting not only the popular culture of the period, but also social attitudes of the post-World War II era, a time when America and the rest of the world were undergoing many changes. In retrospect, conformity is one of the core values of the 1950s and early 60s. Everyone was expected to adhere to a certain standard of morals, certain lifestyle, certain way to dress, certain way to behave, and those who openly rebelled against this, like bikers, rebellious teenagers, beatniks, later on hippies, were mocked or demonized by some, but some places they were considered brave individuals and nonconformists. The wild youth films often featured teen gangs, fighting other gangs, battling straight teens, or even rebelling against adults and adult authority. Contrary to the retro wild youth movies and TV shows made in recent years about this period, the teen gang theme was not always linked with motorcycles and black leather jackets. Most of the teen gang and juvenile delinquent movies of the late 1950s did not explicitly place their wild teen protagonists in motorcycle gangs, although some of them did. And of course, tonight when you see Crybaby, you will notice that Crybaby Walker does ride a motorcycle and wear a black leather jacket. The beginning of the bad biker movies was, of course, 1953's The Wild One with Marlon Brando. Although Brando and his gang were hardly teens, Brando was actually 29 at the time when he made that movie. By the late 1960s, biker gangs on film were more like the Hells Angels, and they were mostly divorced from the teen genre, which was starting to vanish anyway. However, there was just as many urban street gang and even high school gang films where the teenagers and rebellious teens drove cars or took the subway or walked or got a ride from mom or something like that. They did have the rebel wild one look, however. They wore their leather jackets or sometimes their matching red satin jackets. They had the ducktail style, girl cream hair, and so on. Aside from a handful of serious dramas which attempted to address the causes of teen rebellion, movies like Rebel Without a Cause and Blackboard Jungle, most of these wild youth movies are outright exploitation, mixing sex and violence and applying this to a younger demographic, both to attract the teen viewers who like to see their peers on screen and to attract the older audiences who like to be shocked at the antisocial antics of the younger generation. This was not exclusively a Hollywood phenomenon, with wild youth movies being produced in the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Mexico, and elsewhere. T. Wolfpack with Henry Buchholz, who was really German. That was a German film, released in the United States as a wild teen film. However, regardless of where the films were made, the general motifs were surprisingly consistent, regardless of the country of origin. Wild youth films played on a fear of youthful rebellion against conservative core values, a feeling that teens engaging in anarchic violence and promiscuity would threaten their civilized society. In the movie Crybaby, we see that the gang called the Drapes is actually a co-ed gang. There's female members as well as male members. And this is actually echoed in many 1950s wild youth movies, with teen girls getting in as much trouble as their male counterparts. There are even a number of wild youth films with female protagonists, rather than merely casting them as sex object sidekicks or innocent victims. In comparison with the wild youth movies, the mild youth films are often comedies or musicals or musical comedies, or they're fairly tame, sort of soap opera style melodramas, but with youthful protagonists. The conflicts in these plots were not between rival gangs, or between gangs and the squares, or between juvenile delinquents and the police, but the films rather dealt with more innocuous sort of romantic issues or even generational matters, such as trying to convince the adults that rock and roll was good, clean fun rather than the devil's music. The settings of the mild youth films were also different than the wild youth films. Instead of big cities or even suburbia, these mild youth movies often take place in small towns, rural areas, or the beach. Some people consider the beach movies to be an entirely separate teen movie genre, but they also fall into the mild youth genre. Violence is absent or is downplayed, and the raw sexuality, sort of the exploitive part of the wild youth film, becomes budding romance or the healthy but innocent display of attractive young people dancing and surfing and participating in other sanctioned social activities. West Side Story is actually a hybrid of sort. It combines the rival gangs theme with the musical format, making it a mix of both wild youth and mild youth movies. It has drama, it has romance, it has gang violence, but people are singing and dancing, so it's a little bit of everything. And of course, who can forget the epic rivalry between the Sharks and the Jets, which also inspired the National Hockey League rivalry. By the mid to late 1960s, the contemporary set mild youth and wild youth films began to fade away. However, they were replaced by 1970s and 80s nostalgia for that era, including TV shows like Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, movies like American Graffiti, American Hot Wax, The Wanderers, and most particularly, Grease. In other words, these were idealized period pictures about the previous 2 decades, the decades before the Vietnam War, before the struggle for civil rights, before Watergate, before the hippies and drugs and campus unrest and race riots, and so on. This nostalgia for the 50s and 60s led directly to Hairspray, and Hairspray led to tonight's movie, Cry Baby, which is about the cross-cultural romance between teen gang member Crybaby Walker and a white-bread, straight-arrow Allison Brewer Williams. There's also a subtext of conflict between Crybaby Walker's raucous rockabilly music and the bland pop songs performed by the Straits.